borrow Jonah's stand. Okay. There's just too much stuff here for me. I will back into it. We will have fireworks. So I'm just going to come over here so we don't have fireworks. All right, can y'all hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay, so today we're going to start a new sermon series, and it's the book of Jonah. Fun, right? We can talk about big fish, but not today. Sorry, no big fish today. So let me start out by reading our passage, and it is kind of long, but it's a full section, so bear with me. It's Jonah chapter 1. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, "Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." But Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish, so he paid his fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and such a mighty storm came up on the sea that the ship threatened to break up. Then the sailors were afraid, and each cried to his God. They threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. Jonah, meanwhile, had gone down into the hold of the ship and had laid down and was fast asleep. The captain came and said to him, "What are you doing? Sound asleep. Get up. Call on your God. Perhaps the God will spare us a thought so that we do not perish." The sailors said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots so that we may know on whose account this calamity has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, "Tell us why this calamity has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where did you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?" "I am a Hebrew," he replied. "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were even more afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them so. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you, that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea was growing more and more tempestuous. He said to them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great storm has come upon you." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more stormy against them. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, O Lord, we pray, do not let us perish on account of this man. Do not make us guilty of innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." So they picked Jonah up and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord even more, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. But the Lord provided a large fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. So I guess I lied a little bit. Fish kind of shows up in this one. But we'll talk more about fish next week. So what I want to do, though, is talk a little bit about the whole book of Jonah. Unlike so many of the other books of the prophets, most Jewish people did not think Jonah was actually a living prophet. But this book was actually written to be a satire. Everybody kind of familiar with that term? And we'll talk about that, I think, more in the last of the series. We'll talk a little more about the satire. But it frees us a little bit to not worry about what kind of fish. Was it a whale? Was it a grouper? You know, we don't need to worry about the kind of fish. What we need to look at is the big picture of it, because that's how our Jewish colleagues look at this story. They don't worry about, when did Jonah actually live, etc., what kind of fish. They just kind of look at it as, what's the story trying to tell us? And so what I want to talk about, first of all, is Jonah heads to Tarshish. Now, if you're not familiar with the geography, Nineveh is to the east of where Jonah is. Tarshish is to the west. So he is going in what? The opposite direction that he's been called to go. Now, do you really think he thought God wasn't in the west? No, he knew. He absolutely knew. Jews were very aware of the fact God is God over all. I mean, he says that God is the God of the seas and the land. So he absolutely knew that God would be in Tarshish as well. So can anyone think of any other possibility why he might have headed to Tarshish instead west instead of east to Nineveh?
Rebellion.
Rebellion, I heard rebellion, that's part of it, yeah. What else? What does he make himself by going west? It's on the board up there, it's kind of a hint. Unavailable. He makes himself unavailable. By getting up and heading as far west as he can head, as far away from Nineveh as he can go, he's making himself unavailable. Like I said, he's totally aware of the fact he can't run from God. But he can make himself unavailable. He can put himself in a position where he can't talk to the Ninevites. God, I'd do it, but I'm sorry, there's no boat sailing from Tarshish back to Joppa and then to Nineveh. I'm sorry. Or maybe he's thinking, well, if I go to Tarshish and I spend a little bit of time there, by the time that I get back to doing what God wanted me to do, God will have already destroyed Nineveh. That's a wise plan, isn't it? It's such a wise plan. Either way, he's hoping that enough time will pass that God's going to either send somebody else to do it, doesn't have to be him, or the Ninevites are already going to be destroyed. Folks, I have to admit, I have done this in my life. I think all of us have. I think this is one of those things that sometimes we really struggle when God says to do something, and we find ways, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, to make ourselves unavailable. You know, has God ever called you to apologize to somebody, and so you call when you know they're not home? Yeah. Or maybe you see someone in need and you feel the Spirit kind of tell you to do something, and then you kind of think about it logically and you go, oh, but somebody better will come along after me, so I'm just going to bow out and let God send someone better qualified than me. I'll raise my hand for that one too. That's in essence what Jonah is doing in our passage today. He isn't just running from God. He is trying to make himself unavailable to God. That is his rebellion. We don't always recognize that as out and out rebellion because we're not raising our fist at God and saying, I'm not going to do that. We just move ourselves or wait a little longer. We do something else. We stay busy. We go get into something. We avoid the conversation. We avoid the person. You know, I can't apologize to him if I can't find him. It's not my fault I don't get in my car and go look for him. You know, or call him on the phone. So, or we just wait and hope that somebody else notices them. You ever had that feeling as you're driving, you should go do something, even a little bit down the road, you feel like maybe I should turn around and go back and do something, and no, God will send someone else. God will send someone else, right? And it's true. It's not like if Tinker doesn't respond, God's up there ringing his ears going, I don't know what I'm going to do, Tinker didn't do it. No, God absolutely can come up with another solution. But let's look what happens to us when we refuse to participate in God's work. Let's think about Jonah. Okay? Was he having a holiday? No. He was so exhausted from running from God, he was sleeping through one of the worst storms ever. That's some serious exhaustion, folks, to be able to sleep through whatever it was that was happening on this ship. Which was obviously really bad because the sailors are all having a religious experience and throwing stuff overboard. I mean, they're trying their hardest to save themselves, save the boat, to save everyone in there. So obviously, we got lots of rocking and tossing and boats just up and down, probably creaking and who knows what else. By the way, these weren't big boats. Most of these boats were as long as this room, so, it doesn't take much of a storm for a boat like that to kind of break apart. There's lots of them on the bottom of the Mediterranean, I'm sorry to say. So, here he is, just so exhausted. He's sleeping through this storm. They finally come and they wake him up. And what is his response after they wake him up? Just throw me overboard. Just throw me over. You know how much despair he must have had in his heart to get to that point? How he's feeling overall to say, I just don't even want to live, just throw me overboard. Just get rid of me. So he's lost that feeling of purpose in his life. He's sunk into probably a very deep depression. I mean, this sleeping through the storm and this wanting to be thrown overboard, I see a man that has just really hit some desperate times. So his decision to not participate in what God's doing, unfortunately, has not made him comfortable. It has not been a good thing. It has caused disquiet in his body. It has caused suffering in his psyche. And mentally and physically, it's exhausted him. So he's lost his peace. He's lost his joy. He's lost his purpose for living. And he's lost his relationship with God by doing that. So, as I said, he's sleeping through this storm, but it's interesting looking at what our sailors are doing in this storm. Because like I said, God is still at work. God wasn't wringing God's hands. God's still at work. And God now works on these sailors. First, these sailors call out to their own gods. And then they start throwing the cargo over, and then they're so desperate, they cast lots so that they can blame it on somebody, figure out who's at fault here, and then they start rowing even harder. They're desperate. They're absolutely desperate. And after Jonah's lost his meaning in life, it's really interesting that his throw me overboard now has an effect on these sailors, which I'm sure was not his intention. Jonah didn't come out thinking, oh, if I say, just throw me overboard, I'm running for God, that they would have a revival. But that's what they do. They end up having their own spiritual revival. They're asking spiritual questions. They start by praying to their own gods. Then they start asking Jonah these spiritual questions. Who do you serve? Where are you from? What's your God? They are asking all questions. And then, after they finally throw Jonah overboard and the sea quiets, they're like, oh my, God is real. And now they're worshiping God. So, God wasn't at a loss, was he? Absolutely wasn't. But, again, the toll on Jonah for not obeying has really hurt him. So much so he's going to get to spend some time in time out inside a fish or a whale or whatever it was. What I want us to think about today as we're thinking about this scripture, though, is how many times has God asked us, invited us in to some of God's work, and we've turned away. We've made ourselves unavailable. And maybe once or twice is one thing. But what happens if we make a habit of it? Eventually it does become fist-raising. And we say to God, I'm just not going to do what you want to do. I've got my own life to live. I'm busy here. So we can go down that road where we end up really struggling with our relationship with God. But even if we don't, we're still losing these opportunities to participate and be involved in the work God's doing. And yet we're all begging, God, use me. God, we want to see things happen. And God's like, well, I've been trying, folks. I've been trying to get you involved. I wanted to share a personal story of one time when I used to drive home the same route every day from the zoo. And in Houston, I don't see them so much here, maybe a little bit in Albuquerque, but there would always be handhandlers at the corners with their signs. And I used to give this one guy stuff, and then one day God said, he has a name. And so I went, oh, okay, and I stuck my hand out the window, and I said, hi, I'm Tinker. And he said, oh, I'm Robert. We got to be really good friends. Eventually he came to church with us, and we spent Thanksgiving under his tarp on the side of the road, and he was a wonderful guy, just a really neat guy. And I'm so glad I participated in that, because eventually we were able to help him get his birth certificate and get on benefits, and he got connected with a Methodist, African American Methodist church, but he really liked it. Got it and connected with them and got into housing. And I got to be a part of that story. But folks, I know that I've passed up 99 stories like that in my life. Those times where God has said, hey, Tinker, I want you to stop. And I'm like, oh, but I'm running late. Or God has said, hey, I want you to make this phone call. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. Let me think about it. And then the moment passes. Or God says, Tinker, I want you to get involved in this. And I'm like, oh, but I don't know enough about the subject to get involved. That's what we're seeing in the story of Jonah. Is that he was trying so hard to make himself unavailable. And he ran the other way. And that's the lesson for us. That we have an opportunity to participate in God's work. And yeah, we can fall on that excuse that God will just send somebody else. But it does take a toll on us. It does have an effect on us. And besides, if every one of us responded to all of those leadings of the Spirit, what kind of country do you think we'd have? What kind of world do you think we'd have? It would make a huge difference, wouldn't it? So I pray for all of us, because I do it too, still to this day. Gotten a little bit better. Sometimes when I'm in here praying, God will bring somebody to my mind, and I'll stop right then and there and call them on the phone. And then I still manage to squirrel after that. Can't even remember what I was praying about. Then I got to straighten chairs. So you know how that is. So I'm a master at squirreling myself. I get it. But I want all of us to think about the opportunities that God is presenting to us, opportunities that God has placed in front of us that can make such a difference if we participate. And so I ask all of us, let's not be Jonah. Let's not be unavailable. Let's make ourselves available.